1, 2, 2, 3, 4. One, two, 2, 3, 4. Hi, my name is Ben Markley. I'm the Director of Jazz Studies. I teach jazz piano and direct the jazz ensemble, vocal jazz. Today I want to talk to you a little about the all-state jazz etudes for piano. The first one is in a relaxed samba feel is how it's listed. And a couple of things for pianists that I think is important for you to think about when you play. I see a lot of young pianists using the pedal when they play, and that's something that in almost all circumstances you can take out. So to be clear, this should not be, there should be no pedal in any of this. Secondly, eighth notes in most all jazz styles are going to be interpreted and played legato. That's another thing, and that really kind of shows your knowledge of the style, being able to play those legato. Finally, when you look at quarter notes, it's very important to read the articulation that is marked. That's one thing that's going to change depending on what kind of chart that you're playing and the arranger and the style. Quarter notes are they can be long and short, and you're going to want to make sure to really pay attention to that in the chart. Getting into now the relaxed samba feel tune, a couple of things that I think are worth mentioning. This is a pretty difficult etude, and it's worth practicing hands apart. The bass line in particular for the left hand is fairly difficult, and it's varied rhythmically, and so it's very important that you make sure that you're paying attention to that and playing the bass line correctly each time it comes up when it's varied. Secondly, with this tune is just being sure that you're aware of the ands of the beats. This chart is marked very well in that they have accents on them, and that's something that gives a lot of jazz music forward motion, are the accents on upbeats or the ands of the beats. Moving on to the swing portion of it, which is mostly just changes, a couple rhythms and a written thing at the end. One of the big things to think about there is comping rhythmically, because as a pianist you contribute harmonically to the band but also rhythmically, and there are a number of great pianists to listen to. A few that come to mind as great compers: Wynton Kelly, Red Garland. Those two, especially when you think about them playing with Miles Davis, they did a lot to propel the motion of the beat and the groove. So that's something to think about as well. If you're just starting out as a jazz pianist, I think some of these chord symbols could be a little difficult to deal with. And so my advice to you at that point is to start thinking about the basic kind of three functions of chords that you're going to see, which are major seventh, minor seventh, and dominant seventh. And I'll talk a little about each of those in more detail in the next video. But the final point that I'd like to leave you with all of these etudes, with jazz is it's super important that you internalize the pulse. And you notice that with each of those, I counted off the measure before I played. And that's something that when you go to record this and play this etude, you want to make sure that it's very clear to everyone that you have a tempo already chosen, and that you don't kind of get into the tempo 4 or 5 bars into a tune. So one of the things that I get asked a lot from younger pianists in terms of knowing what chords and things to play is, well, how do I interpret this 9 chord? Or what do these alterations mean? And I want to offer a couple of strategies to kind of help you out with that. Also, before we get started, please visit the Jazz Studies website. I have a handout that will talk a little bit about piano voicings and how to interpret chords and things like that I hope you'll find helpful. So the first skill that you need to develop as a pianist in terms of reading chords is being able to distinguish, is the chord a major 7th, minor 7th, dominant chord. And one of the differences here, if you're coming, say, from a classical background, jazz is going to deal primarily with 4-note chords and above. And so it's good to know the qualities of the triad, but we're also going to add a 7th in there. So for starters, if you're not as solid with those, this is the place to start. So you can think about these chords. I like to think about the triad and then the 7th. So for example, a major 7th chord, that's going to have a major triad with a major 7th. A minor 7th chord is going to have a minor triad with a minor 7th. And a dominant chord, this is one that sometimes people, when they're first learning, they get this mixed up. But this is actually a mixture of the two. This has a major triad and a minor 7th. That's the chord that you hear at the end of Happy Birthday when they say, and many more. So anyway, as you get better at recognizing these things, what you want to be able to do is see the chord on the paper and the chord symbol, and be able to plop down dominant, minor, major. And that's really the first thing. So some ways that you can practice this are, let's say you're gonna take C major. And one of the ways that we practice things in jazz is to go around the circle of fifths. So if you're doing this, what I would do is, it's very helpful to play these things in both hands. So you're going to play C major. And what I would do is I would arpeggiate the chord up and down. And we'll go to F, which is the next stop in the circle. So you can go around the circle doing that. The other thing to add in while you're practicing that is to say the note names, because what we're working towards is we want to be able to look at a piece of music that has chord changes on it and immediately know that, okay, A minor 7, that's A, C, E, G. And if you think about that, when you get into a tune, once the tune is counted off, most tunes are going to move too fast for you to be able to speak the notes of the chord. By the time you have spoken the notes of the chord, we will be on to the next measure or after. So you've got to be able to realize that almost instantaneously. And practicing like this is going to get you to do that. So once you're solid on root position 7th chords, the next thing that we start to do is to create voicings. And what voicings is we take notes from the chord, from the scale, and we rearrange them. And with jazz, it's a lot of fun because we can get some different sounds. So these can all be different functions or different voicings of C major. So that's where you can have a lot of fun exploring some of the different possibilities. One place to start, though, is we're going to take a number of the same notes that are in the root position chord and just rearrange them a little differently. The one change is that we're actually going to remove the root. So these are going to be 3, 7, 9, 5 voicings, and each hand is going to play 2. Now you might say, well, why are we getting rid of the root? Well, we're going to figure in a lot of cases when you're comping, when you're playing chords, you're going to be playing with a bass player, and so they're going to play the root. So that means we are free to create some different voicings and to play notes that aren't doubled within the bass. So now this sound can become this. So here's root position. Now here's 3, 7, 9, 5. Quite a different sound. So that's one of the voicings. Another one that you could also work on, which you'll see on this paper as well. We're going to put the 7th on the bottom. So we'll go 7, 3, 5, 9. And you see, those are some very pleasing sounds and quite different from what you see from a root position 7th chord. So to recap, with any kind of these chords, you need to be able to speak all of the, say all of the notes that are in the chord. You need to be able to arpeggiate them and move them around within the circle. And that's going to give you the tools to start dealing with jazz charts and chord symbols as they come up for you. Thanks.